In 1991, doctors stopped a woman's heart. They cooled her body to a temperature no human should survive. They drained the blood from her brain. Her eyes were taped shut. Devices blasting loud clicking sounds were placed in her ears to make sure her brain was no longer responding. And then, she came back and described things she should not have known. For thousands of years, humans believed death was absolute, final, a single moment after which nothing remained. But modern medicine did something terrifying. It learned how to bring people back. Today, millions of people have survived cardiac arrest. Their hearts stopped beating. Their brains were deprived of oxygen. Some had no pulse for several minutes. And yet, doctors restarted them. But the strangest part isn't that they survived. It's what some of them say happened while they were gone. Because across countries, religions, and cultures, people keep describing the same impossible things. Tunnels, light, out-of-body experiences, dead relatives, an overwhelming sense of peace. Some even claim they watched doctors trying to save them. And now, science faces a question that sounds almost forbidden. What if humanity still doesn't understand what death actually is? First, we need to understand something important. Clinical death and biological death are not the same thing. Most people imagine death as a line. You are either alive or dead. But the body doesn't work that way. Death is a process. When the heart stops, blood flow to the brain collapses almost instantly. Consciousness disappears. Brain activity begins shutting down. But brain cells do not die immediately. Some can survive for minutes, sometimes longer, which means there is a strange gray zone between life and irreversible death. And modern hospitals operate inside that gray zone every day. CPR, defibrillators, ventilators, emergency body cooling. All of these technologies are attempts to stop death before it fully finishes happening. That alone would sound supernatural to almost every human who ever lived. But this is where things become deeply strange. Because some patients report conscious experiences during periods when they should not have been conscious at all. This is exactly what scientists tried to investigate. In 2014, researchers led by Dr. Sam Parnia published one of the largest near-death studies ever conducted, the AWARE study. They examined survivors of cardiac arrest across multiple hospitals. Some patients reported vivid awareness during resuscitation attempts. One patient even accurately described events happening around him while doctors believed he was completely unconscious. The study did not prove the existence of an afterlife, but it challenged something scientists had long assumed, that consciousness shuts off immediately after the heart stops. Later, the AWARE-2 study detected bursts of brain activity during CPR in some patients, patterns normally associated with conscious processing and awareness. And suddenly the question changed. The debate was no longer, are near-death experiences real? The debate became, what exactly is the dying brain doing? And this is where the woman from the beginning of the story returns. Her name was Pam Reynolds. In 1991, she underwent an extremely rare operation to remove a giant brain aneurysm. To perform the surgery, doctors used a procedure called hypothermic cardiac arrest. Her body was dramatically cooled, her heart was stopped, blood was drained from her head. At one point, EEG monitors reportedly showed almost no measurable brain activity. By the medical standards of the time, she was in a state of clinical death. And after the surgery, Pam described things that became world famous. She claimed she heard conversations between doctors. She described surgical instruments. One of them she compared to an electric toothbrush. And the description closely resembled an actual surgical tool used during the operation. For many people, this became one of the strongest arguments suggesting consciousness might exist separately from the body. But skeptics immediately pushed back. Some anesthesiologists argued her memories could have formed before full cardiac arrest. Others suggested her brain may still have retained hidden activity that medical equipment at the time simply could not detect. And this is what makes near-death experiences so unsettling. Even the most famous cases never fully prove either side. But science also has other explanations, and some of them are almost as disturbing as the supernatural ones. When the brain loses oxygen, the visual cortex can malfunction, potentially creating tunnel vision and bright lights. During extreme trauma, the brain may release massive amounts of chemicals that create feelings of peace, detachment, or euphoria. Some researchers believe the temporal lobe becomes hyperactive during the dying process, generating vivid dreamlike or spiritual experiences. But then scientists discovered something even stranger. In 2024, researchers studying dying patients found bursts of intense brain activity even after oxygen supply to the brain had collapsed. In some cases, areas associated with memory, awareness, and perception suddenly entered what researchers described as a neurological hyperdrive. Some signals remained active for several minutes after life support was removed. In other words, the dying brain may temporarily become more active before final shutdown, not less active. More. But then another problem appears. If near-death experiences are simply random hallucinations, why are they often so similar? People across cultures repeatedly describe leaving their bodies, moving through darkness, bright lights, dead relatives, overwhelming peace. Even children report similar experiences. And humans have described these experiences for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptian texts describe journeys after death. Greek philosophers wrote about souls leaving the body. Medieval accounts describe tunnels of light centuries before modern hospitals existed. The details change, but the structure remains, again and again and again. Almost as if humanity keeps brushing against the edge of something without understanding what it actually is. And this leads to the biggest question of all. What exactly is consciousness? Modern neuroscience still cannot fully explain it. Scientists understand neurons, electrical signals, brain chemistry, but nobody can explain why physical matter creates subjective experience in the first place. Why do billions of electrical impulses produce the feeling of being you? Why does consciousness exist at all? Philosopher David Chalmers famously called this the hard problem of consciousness, and near-death experiences sit directly on top of that mystery. Because if consciousness is entirely produced by ordinary brain activity, then awareness should disappear completely once the brain shuts down. But if fragments of awareness continue longer than expected, then humanity may understand consciousness far less than we think. And that does not necessarily mean something supernatural, only that our understanding may still be incomplete. And maybe that's why near-death experiences fascinate humanity so deeply. Not because they prove heaven, not because they prove an afterlife, but because they reveal something unsettling. Science still does not fully understand what happens when humans die. For most of history, death was irreversible. Now machines restart hearts. Doctors cool bodies. Surgeons temporarily stop life itself. Humanity has begun opening doors evolution never prepared us to look behind. And standing behind those doors may be one terrifying possibility. Death may not be a single moment after all, just a process we still barely understand. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being resuscitated. Their heart is stopped. Doctors are counting compressions, machines are shocking their chest, and for a few minutes, that person exists in one of the strangest states a human being can possibly experience. Not fully alive, but not fully gone either. Somewhere between biology and oblivion. And when some of them come back, they say the darkness wasn't empty. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe the brain simply creates one final hallucination before shutting down forever. Or maybe humanity discovered something terrifying the moment we learned how to reverse death. That consciousness does not disappear nearly as cleanly as we once believed. And the closer science gets to bringing people back, the stranger death itself begins to look.